Yeah, ready to go, Kieran.
So hi everyone, my name is Kieran Grieg, and I'm a researcher at Charity Evaluators, or ACE. ACE works to find and promote the most effective ways to help animals. Today I'm going to provide a brief overview of a variety of ACE's research, including our cause prioritization, charity evaluations, intervention reports, and some of the other research we complete. I've also tried to leave ample time for questions and discussion at the end of the presentation. To start off, clearly many animals need our help in so many different ways, from animals used in research to companion animals, farmed animals, wild animals, the list goes on. So while we want to help all of them, at some point we're going to have to ask ourselves, where will we have the greatest impact? We need to think critically about where we can do the most good, and that's what I'm going to talk about now. So when ACE thinks about what broad area to prioritize, ACE considers three factors. We consider importance. So how many animals are involved? What is the scale of the problem? We consider neglect. How much attention is paid to the problem? And how much funding does that issue receive? And finally, tractability. How well do we understand the problem and its potential solutions? At any one point in time in the world, we have around 100 million animals used for research, 1 billion companion animals, 33 billion farmed animals, and that's not including aquatic animals, so that's all the farmed fish, or the invertebrates that we farm, such as honeybees. And then there's somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 trillion wild animals. As you can probably appreciate, it's pretty hard to estimate at that point. And that 10 trillion estimate certainly excludes aquatic animals and invertebrates. Now, every single one of these groups of animals is important. But as you can see, these last two categories have a particularly large number of animals. So that suggests we should prioritize some efforts on those. Now, let's look at those other factors. Of all the donations in the United States, only 3% go to help either animals or the environment. For simplicity's sake, let's say 1.5% went to help animals, and of that 1.5%, only 1% went to help farmed animals. 1%. That's despite the fact that something like 99% of the animals in the United States that are used or killed are farmed animals. Now, there's just clearly a large discrepancy there, and again, this suggests that farmed animals should be prioritized to a greater extent. What about wild animals? Again, there's 10 trillion, give or take a couple of trillion. These numbers indicate we should care about the millions and millions of wild animals that are suffering every day in the wild from disease, predation, or starvation. And natural or not, it's still suffering, and we should care about it if we can find a way to help that issue. Unfortunately, that's where the problem lies with wild animals. At this point, we just don't feel we have a good grasp of how to affect that suffering in a robustly positive way. That is, farmed animals seem generally a more tractable cause than wild animals. And because of that, we generally view farmed animal advocacy as the most impactful animal advocacy cause. Now, within farmed animal advocacy, ACE uses research to identify interventions or tactics that people commonly use to help animals and evaluate them to understand which are the most impactful. So, for instance, we've reviewed leafletting, corporate outreach, undercover investigations, online advertising, protests, and humane education. Our intervention reports can involve grey and academic literature reviews, cost effectiveness estimates, and interviews from the field. Honestly, it's a complicated process, and I'm not about to try to explain it in detail to you in my limited time today. We do have detailed reports on our website if you're interested. I'm just going to touch on leafletting now to help explain how we think critically about an intervention's effectiveness. One could hand out leaflets at a local university. In some ways, this could be promising. It's very easy to do, and it's very cheap. In our evaluation of leafletting, we completed a systematic literature search, a meta-analysis of 6 randomized controlled trials, case studies, and interviews with those in the field. In the end, we concluded leafletting didn't seem especially promising. Actually, our analysis suggested the effects of leaflets on short-term consumption of animal products, again, didn't look promising. For instance, the point estimate from our meta-analysis suggested leaflets may in fact cause short-term increases in poultry consumption.
Hi, Kieran. There's a dog barking in the background. Do you have...
I'm so sorry.
That's okay. Do you have a microphone, or are you just using built-in one on your laptop?
I'm just using built-in one on my laptop.
Okay, well, it sounds like the dog is quieting down now, so... Never mind.
I'm so sorry about that, everyone.
That's fine. Bit of comic relief.
Okay, where was I? So regarding our charity evaluations, they're informed by our evaluations of different interventions. In addition, we follow our 7-point criteria for recommendations and for evaluating charities. So that criteria includes room for more funding, quantitative and qualitative analysis of cost effectiveness, looking at whether the charity understand and acts upon signs of success and failure, the track record of the charity, so how they've implemented their previous programs and whether those programs led to positive changes for animals, the leadership and the strategic vision of the charity, and also whether the charity has a healthy and sustainable organizational culture. As a result of charity evaluations using that criteria, ACE recommends a set of charities that work in ways we think are most likely to produce the greatest gain for animals. These charities actively evaluate and improve their programs. They have a demonstrated need for more funding, and we promote them as our top giving opportunities and as ideal examples of effective advocacy. These charities do a range of activities, from animal qualities, undercover investigations, to the corporate outreach from the Humane League, and GFI's general promotion of clean meat. For further information about any of those charities, please do see their reviews on our website. Also, as a result of our charity evaluations, ACE recommends a group of standout charities. We think they conduct strong work on behalf of animals in ways that could potentially affect just large numbers of animals. We feel confident in the quality of their work, but for one reason or another, we did not select them for top charity recommendation. Again, these charities do a range of activities, some of which are similar to our top charities. Others are quite different. In particular, the focus on research by Fauna-Lytics, of the non-human rights project, the pursuit of legal rights for animals. We also do some activities to support further effective animal advocacy research. One example of this is our survey guidelines project. In order to properly have surveys inform which interventions to use, it's extremely important to make the right decisions on a range of topics. To that end, with our survey guidelines project, ACE helped compose a list of questions bearing on commonly sought information. We've grouped them into categories and then highlighted the most robust approaches. We hope that by sharing these resources, we can help individuals and organizations design surveys both with more confidence and less effort. With our Animal Advocacy Research Fund, we also support research that contributes to understanding effective animal advocacy. So for this fund, a generous benefactor committed $1 million to be used over 3 years, and we hope to distribute this funding via grants to advocacy groups, academics, and that includes people who are working on their thesis or postdoctoral researchers, and other qualified researchers. All are welcome to apply by submitting a proposal on the website. We have so far granted out several $100,000 to promising research via that fund. I'm now coming towards the end of my talk. If there was one message that I wanted you to take away from this talk, it might be that we need to think strategically about how to help animals in order to more effectively help them. But also, I want to highlight reasons for optimism. For one, it's obvious that animal advocacy has been making progress over the past 10 years. Just look at the freezer aisle at many of your grocers, and you realize how much change has occurred over that time. We've had lots of successes, but we still have got really far to go. We need to ask ourselves, what are the best activities? And that's ultimately got to be the focus of EAs. And then, based on that, we need to progress as efficiently as possible towards minimizing animal suffering. So, please do network with everyone here today, and together try to discover the best ways to create real and meaningful change. Thank you so much for your time. Please feel free to contact me or anyone at ACE if you have any questions. My contact details are on this slide. The emails for all of the staff are available on our website. And I would now be more than happy to answer some of your questions and respond to some discussion.
Great, thank you very much for joining us, Kieran. Can you hear me? Can you?
I can hear you.
Yep, fabulous. Okay, so I have some questions here from the audience. This one has a lot of votes. What are some immediate red flags that an animal charity is not effective?
Sure. So I think one of the most immediate red flags is going to be, what are the focus areas of the charity? And if it is focusing on an area which seems to be of a lesser scale and seems to be less neglected than some of the other areas within animal advocacy. So, for example, a charity might just be focused on a companion animal shelter. And just in light of them focusing on that, I think that they're generally going to be less effective than a charity which is focusing on a more promising area, such as farmed animal advocacy. I think that, sorry, go on.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep, did you have more you wanted to say about that?
Yeah, sure. So I think that another red flag to be on the lookout for when looking at a charity is to what extent do they seem to change their programs in light of evidence? So has the charity just stuck with one approach, and perhaps it's an ideological approach, and no matter the kind of feedback that they have got or the results of various studies, they continue to stick to that approach? If the charity seems unlikely to update their approach in light of evidence, this seems like good evidence that they're not going to be effective over the longer term.
Great, thanks for that. So another question here. We had a really well-attended lecture on wild animal suffering yesterday, so it seems to be something that people are quite interested in. So a question from the audience is, as wild animals as a cause area currently seems intractable, have ACE considered making grants for more research into that area?
Yeah, so through our Animal Advocacy Research Fund, we have now funded several studies on wild animal suffering, and particularly to do with building that field or building that movement, and also a study which is looking at the attitudes of biologists or ecologists so that we can better tailor our outreach to them. There has also been another study that we have funded, which is looking at how different common crops, so for example, wheat or perhaps corn, how that impacts vertebrates. So we do know that when those crops are harvested, often there are small rodents, such as mice, who are basically slaughtered during that process. So we are interested in gaining further information about that. So we do certainly see this as a priority area. In the past, ACE has also completed research to do with messaging around wild animal suffering. So we looked at how the results from various farmed animal advocacy leaflets, how that then impacted attitudes relevant to wild animal suffering. I would say potentially a bottleneck here is that there are just very few researchers interested in doing the research. So I think we would be very interested in funding further research on this topic. It's just that, you know, at the moment there are really only 1, 2, even 3 charities focused on this area. There's really only a handful of academics who are interested in this area. So I think if there were further applications for wild animal suffering research, then yes, we would be very interested in funding that.
Great, thank you, Kieran. So now I'm just wondering where you come down on sort of the issue of focusing on animal advocacy versus alternative food sources such as clean meats. Which of those tends to be the more effective approach, in your opinion?
Yeah, so I'm not sure that there is a general answer here. I think that the devil is really going to be in the detail. And so within animal advocacy, there might be some interventions which do seem more effective. And then within kind of promoting of these alternatives, there might be some interventions which seem particularly effective. I think that there are a few almost crucial considerations here, and depending on how you fall on those considerations, you might think differently about the value of those different interventions. So for instance, there have been reports that cultured meat, even under the most optimistic scenarios, it will not achieve cost competitiveness over the next several decades. And if that is the case, and someone holds that view, to them, working on animal advocacy interventions might very well be a better use of their time. I think another thing to consider here is general comparative advantage. So both in terms of us as people who care about animals, I think that our comparative advantage is generally going to be doing things that require that care about animals, so doing generally the advocacy work, and that we will be more replaceable in things to do with cultured meat research or plant-based research by others who are perhaps more motivated by profit, but also consider comparative advantage in terms of, if you're a PhD student and you've just completed your degree in molecular biology, then you're probably better suited to do work on cultured meat than to do work on advocacy. Or perhaps you're a native to a low or middle income country where farmed animal advocacy is just really neglected at the moment. So maybe no matter what your academic background is, you might just be really well suited to promote animal advocacy because it's in that context where it is just so neglected at the moment.
Yeah, right. Some really important considerations there. Thanks, Kieran. So I have another question here, which I think I'll essentially just read verbatim, which many animal organizations suffer from poor management and internal cultural issues, most recently with sexual harassment allegations in the US. So why did ACE decide to add the organizational culture criterion, and how can often young, effective animal charities enhance their management capacity and expertise?
That is a really good question. So ACE decided to add this organizational factors to our recommendation criteria after we did become more aware of these issues at organizations. And then once we did become more aware, the organizational culture plays a large part in our recommendations, and it can be the difference between a charity receiving that top recommendation or receiving a standout recommendation or not receiving any recommendation status. In terms of what charities can do, I would point people to a blog post we have on this topic. It was by my colleague and senior researcher, Tony Adelberg. I think the title is, "What Can Animal Advocates Do to Promote Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in the Movement?" So I think that is just going to give a much better answer than anything I'm about to say. And I would point people to that resource for further information. I think this was also a longer question, so I'm wondering if there was a part in there that I didn't address, which I should address.
No, I think that's fine, thanks. I just have one last question, a bit of on a different tack. There seems to be quite a lot of interest in from people in sort of getting involved with ACE or working for ACE, and so the question is, what should people study if they want to work for ACE, and how can they get involved? Are there any like internships and that sort of thing available with the organization?
Yeah, so ACE has volunteering opportunities. We also have internships. So the internships can be research internships or a communications internship. during those internships, you'll work closely with a staff member and you'll take the lead on a project. The internship usually lasts 3 months and you're offered a stipend during that period. So if you're interested, I would really encourage you to apply. I think you can find the internship application form on the Join Our Team part of the ACE website. In terms of what would be the best things to study, I think that, so I should clarify and say that what follows is more of Kieran's personal opinion rather than ACE's formal position. But I think that a quantitative background can be very useful for the work that ACE is doing, and that quantitative skills are lacked in the movement. So like a math undergrad, or specializing in statistics, or specializing in economics, that can be really useful. I've also found that philosophy, for the work that we do, can give a really strong underpinning, and I guess you just accumulate very good writing skills and a critical reasoning skills that are very important to the work that we do. But I would say the main thing to do would be to reach out to various animal advocacy organizations that you would be interested in working for, find out what skills they would be most interested in, and then just start volunteering. And like the best teacher of things is experience. So just getting that like on the job or like with the organization experience, I think that's what's going to be most helpful. And that'll probably provide like the best basis in order to then join an animal advocacy organization.
Perfect, thank you very much. That's all we have time for, so let's all please thank Kieran.